I didn't just wake up to heartbreak. I woke up to betrayal wrapped in white silk and stained in silence. My name is Clara. And on the day I was supposed to walk down the aisle in front of everyone I loved, I stood frozen in a borrowed bridal suite, clutching a letter that made my hands shake so hard I couldn't hold on to the bouquet. It wasn't a breakup text. It wasn't a call. It was a handwritten note, left by the man I was supposed to marry, just 3 hours before our vows. I sat on the floor in my wedding dress, veil still pinned, hair perfectly curled, and read the words over and over again until they stopped making sense. Claire, I can't do this. I'm sorry. You deserve more than I can give. Please don't look for me. That was it. No explanation. No warning. Just gone. And the worst part? He left me there at his family's estate where they were hosting the wedding. His mother refused to come up and speak to me. His sisters avoided my eyes. And when I tried to ask someone, anyone, what was going on, all I got were mumbled apologies and pitying looks. One of his aunts had the nerve to say, "Maybe it's for the best." He always felt pressured. I didn't even cry at first. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the shock had swallowed me whole. I didn't know how to breathe, much less sob. They asked if I still wanted to go down and greet the guests, to explain. Explain what, exactly? That the man I thought I'd spend forever with had vanished like a coward? That I wasn't even worth a proper goodbye? I didn't go down. I locked myself in the room and listened to the sound of laughter fading, conversations shifting into whispers, then silence. The venue emptied. The chairs were packed away. The flowers withered. And I sat there, still dressed as a bride, but not a wife. By nightfall, I removed the pins from my hair with trembling fingers and watched the curls fall like pieces of a dream I didn't know how to rebuild. The media caught wind of it, of course. His family was prominent, old money, well-connected. Headlines read, "Runaway groom leaves bride waiting at the altar." They turned my pain into a punchline. They made memes. They laughed. And I did nothing. For weeks I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I replayed everything over and over. Our engagement. Our planning. The way he held me the night before at the rehearsal dinner and whispered, "Tomorrow it's you and me." Twice. He left me with bills. With whispers. With shame I didn't earn. But pain has a strange way of becoming fuel when you've got nothing left to lose. And what started as heartbreak turned into hunger. Not for revenge, not the way people think of it, but for reinvention. I had spent years molding myself into the woman he wanted. Elegant. Composed. Always agreeable. I wore the clothes his mother approved of. Took a job that wouldn't threaten his ego. Laughed politely at his jokes even when they hurt. But not anymore. That version of me, the version who waited at the altar, she died the day he disappeared. And what rose from her ashes wasn't someone he could ever recognize again. Not the media. Not his family. Not him. I was going to become everything they said I couldn't be. And I was going to do it on my own name. Starting with the one place they never thought I'd return to. The venue. The same mansion where they left me heartbroken and humiliated. That was about to have a new owner. Because if pain was the price, I was going to make it worth every cent. They say time heals everything, but that's only half the truth. Time doesn't heal, it reveals. It reveals who really loved you, who only loved the image of you, and who was silently cheering when you fell apart. After I was left at the altar, most of my so-called friends disappeared. The invitations stopped. The texts dried up. Even the women who once gushed over my ring on Instagram stopped commenting altogether. As if my humiliation was contagious. But what they didn't know was that I was building something. Brick by emotional brick. I moved out of the apartment I'd shared with him. Found a one-bedroom loft on the other side of the city. Small, quiet, and mine. I picked up the pieces of the wedding business I had put on pause and poured myself into it like a woman possessed. Designing floral layouts, managing events, networking with vendors, until I was fully booked for months. But there was always one venue I avoided. One estate I never contacted. His. It took everything in me not to pass by that place just to see if they were still hosting other weddings. I heard whispers. They struggled after the incident. Some couples canceled bookings. Others feared the gossip. It became that venue. the one where a groom ghosted his bride. The name carried a stain. And one night, in a haze of wine and quiet rage, I decided to see if that stain had stuck long enough to crack the foundation. I searched the business registry, and there was, for sale. My hands froze over the keyboard. The same sprawling estate, the ballroom where I almost danced into a lie, the courtyard where my mother cried for me behind closed doors, was now listed at a desperate price. I barely slept that night. The next morning I called the number listed and scheduled a private showing. The agent had no idea who I was. She showed me around with her rehearsed lines, pointing out natural light, grand ceilings, and perfect acoustics for romantic vows. I smiled, nodded, and said nothing as I walked the halls I had once drifted through in satin heels and silent hope. There were scuff marks on the stairs, cracks in the foundation, dust clinging to the corners of untouched rooms. It was poetic. This place had decayed, just like the fantasy I once believed in. By the time we reached the ballroom, I'd made my decision. "I'll take it," I said. The agent blinked. "Would you like to know the asking?" "No." I said, "I'll take it." Gish. It took every bit of savings, every loan I could pull from silent partners, and a gamble on myself that most people wouldn't dare take. But I did. And 3 months later I stood at the center of that ballroom, not as a bride, not as someone's future wife, but as the owner. The first thing I did? Tore down the chandeliers. They had always reminded me of glass prisons, beautiful, fragile, and capable of falling at any moment. Then I ripped up the carpet, repainted every wall, replaced every whisper of the past with something that spoke of resilience, not romance. I renamed it the Phoenix House. Because just like the name, I had risen from ashes. And now so would anyone who walked through these doors. Weddings, empowerment retreats, women-owned business launches. It became more than a venue. It became a movement. The press took notice. Articles circulated. Former runaway bride transforms abandoned venue into luxury empowerment space. They didn't recognize me, at least not at first, until one day I got a request through our website. A couple was looking to book the Phoenix House for their winter wedding. The groom's name? Andrew Caldwell. Him. I stared at the screen so long I forgot to breathe. Same name. Same face. Same man who vanished hours before we were meant to say I do. No. He was asking to book my venue. He didn't know. How could he? I had changed everything. My name on the paperwork. My face now gracing covers of bridal magazines. The voice behind the rising success of one of the most powerful venue brands in the region. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I clicked accept. I was going to let him walk through those doors. But this time, I'd be waiting. They say the universe has a wicked sense of humor. And that morning, as I stood by the front archway of the Phoenix House dressed in all black, tailored, sharp, intentional, I could feel the irony choking the air. This was the same driveway where I once stood in white lace, waiting for a man who never showed up. Where I felt small, abandoned, shattered. But today, I didn't wait for anyone. I watched through the tall glass as his car pulled into the circle drive. The same smirk that once made my heart flutter now looked unsure. A little faded. He stepped out wearing a fitted navy suit, hair slicked like always, glancing around like he owned the place. Except he didn't. Not anymore. I let my assistant greet them first. Andrew and his fiancée, a tall, pristine woman with a voice like frost and a diamond that sparkled louder than she spoke. I stayed hidden on purpose. Watched from the upper-level balcony as he walked the halls I rebuilt with my own hands. He didn't recognize anything. Of course not. He never paid attention to details. But when he stepped into the ballroom, something in him shifted. He froze, looked around, then turned to the wedding coordinator and asked, "Wait, is this where?" But stopped himself, as even he knew. This was the place he left me. I waited until the very end of their tour before I made my appearance. I descended the staircase slowly, heels clicking, heart pounding. Not from nerves but control. Every step was a reminder. I wasn't the same girl. I wasn't waiting for love anymore. I was building legacies. When I reached the main floor, he turned, and for a moment the color drained from his face. Clara. My name sounded foreign coming from him. Like he was trying to summon a ghost. I smiled. It's Miss Bennet now. His fiancée looked between us, confused. You two know each other? Andrew opened his mouth, probably to lie. But I stepped in. We were engaged. Years ago. Her eyes widened. Oh. Awkward silence. Delicious silence. Andrew cleared his throat. This is your venue? I tilted my head. It is. Every inch of it. He blinked like he couldn't process it. But I thought you left the city. After. I rebuilt, I said sharply. After you disappeared, I didn't vanish. I rose. He said nothing. His fiancée narrowed her eyes. Is there a problem? I smiled at her. Not at all. The Phoenix House is honored to host you. Just make sure the groom shows up this time. The silence that followed could have swallowed the room whole. They didn't stay long after that. The tour was suddenly shorter than expected. Andrew couldn't look me in the eye. And when they left, I stood in the same spot where I had once wept for a man who tossed me aside like I was nothing. Except this time I didn't cry. I thrived. The bookings kept coming. Influencers. Executives. Women who knew pain but were now writing new stories in the same space I had rewritten mine. I launched a podcast, Burned but Not Broken, sharing stories of women who rose after ruin. It went viral within weeks. And Andrew? Well, he didn't book the venue. But he didn't walk away either. 2 weeks later, I received an email from a private address. Subject: I owe you more than an apology. I didn't open it. Some wounds don't need closure from the people who caused them. They heal when you build a life big enough that their name no longer echoes inside it. That's what I was doing. And as words spread, as headlines buzzed, asterisk from heartbreak to empire, Clara Bennett's unstoppable rise, asterisk, I realized I didn't need revenge. I was the revenge. I thought ignoring the email would be the end of it. But people like Andrew, they can't let go when the thing they underestimated becomes the thing they can't reach. A week passed. Then another. And just when I began to think he'd finally accepted silence as my answer, he showed up again. This time uninvited. It was a quiet Wednesday morning. The staff was prepping for a charity gala that evening, and I was in my office finalizing vendor payments when Dana, my assistant, knocked. There's someone downstairs asking for you. Says his name is Andrew. I didn't flinch. I didn't ask why he was there. I simply stood up, smoothed my jacket, and walked down the grand staircase like it was a runway made for reckoning. He stood near the reception holding his phone like it was a shield. His hair wasn't as neat this time. His suit looked lived in. And for once his arrogance wasn't the first thing to enter the room. He looked tired. No, hollow. Clara, he said, voice low. Please. Just 5 minutes. I didn't speak. Just turned and led him to the side garden. My favorite spot with white stone benches and a fountain I had installed myself. The sound of water helped dull the ache of memory. He sat across from me like a man about to plead for parole. I'm not here to beg, he started. Good, I said. Because I'm not here to forgive. He hesitated. I didn't come to explain away what I did. I know it was cruel. Cowardly. I need you to know that it wasn't about you. I laughed. Not out of humor, but exhaustion. Of course it was about me. You left me. You humiliated me. You ran when you realized I was too much woman for your shallow world. He looked down. I was scared. I tilted my head. Of what? A life with someone who actually loved you. He didn't answer. He didn't have one. He looked up again. You've changed. Growth looks different from guilt, I said. He chuckled softly, almost sadly. You always had fire in you. I just never knew how bright it would burn. We sat in silence. A bird chirped nearby. Someone was setting up florals for the evening's event. You didn't deserve that day, he said. I've thought about it 1,000,000 times. How I should have said something earlier. How I should have faced you like a man. You just took the easy way out, I finished. Because deep down you never saw me as your equal. I was your fallback. Your sure thing. The girl who made your life look better. He flinched but didn't deny it. And that was the moment I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. He cleared his throat. I'm not here to ask for anything. I know you've moved on. I can see that. I needed to tell you I'm sorry. I stood slowly, brushing imaginary dust from my skirt. You know what the hardest part was, Andrew? He looked up, eyes searching. It wasn't being left. It was spending all those months afterward convincing myself that it must have been something wrong with me. That I wasn't enough. That I wasn't pretty enough or smart enough or exciting enough to be chosen. His jaw tensed. But now I know, I continued. It wasn't about me being lacking. It was about you being too small to hold a woman like me. He stood too awkward, unsure of what to do with his hands. I wish I had been better. I don't. His brows furrowed. Because if you had been, I said, I might still be stuck in your shadow. And I was always meant to shine. I walked away before he could respond. And I didn't look back. Later that evening, as guests poured into the venue for the gala, elegant dresses, champagne glasses, live jazz humming beneath the soft clink of silverware, I stood near the balcony and looked over the room. My room. There was a time I imagined this place would be filled with our wedding. Now it was filled with my purpose. I gave a keynote speech that night. I talked about resilience. About starting over. About how being left at the altar was the single most powerful thing that had ever happened to me, because it stripped away every illusion and forced me to build something real. The room erupted in applause. And as I stepped down from the podium, a woman in her 60s approached me, tears in her eyes. You don't know how many of us you're speaking for, she whispered. Thank you for not shrinking. I smiled. We don't rise by accident. We rise on purpose. That night, as I slipped off my heels and stood barefoot in the same bridal suite where I once waited for a man who never came, I didn't feel sadness. I felt sovereign. My past no longer held me hostage. I was free. Success has a strange echo. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it hums, soft and constant, like the quiet reminder that you no longer need to chase validation. That's where I was 6 months later. My venue was booked every weekend. Brides who once scrolled Pinterest now scrolled my Instagram page for inspiration. A local magazine did a feature titled From Ditch to Dominant, the woman behind Georgia's hottest event space. I had employees, a waiting list, and a life I crafted with my own 2 hands. But it wasn't just business booming. It was me. Therapy helped. So did late-night journaling, traveling alone, and discovering how good solitude could taste after years of begging for crumbs of companionship. I learned to love silence. I learned to love myself. And then came the industry summit. Every year, event professionals from across the state gathered to network, showcase, and learn. I'd never attended before, mostly because I'd been someone's +1. But this year the board invited me to speak. Not just attend, speak. It felt surreal walking into that grand hotel ballroom, badge around my neck, name in bold letters. Clara Sutton, founder, Rose Hall Events. But nothing could have prepared me for who I saw standing near the registration desk. He looked thinner, less confident. His name badge barely hung straight and his suit was clearly borrowed from better days. And next to him, Brielle. Yes. Her. The woman he left me for. The same woman who had once said, "You'll never keep him, Clara. You're not shiny enough." She wasn't looking very shiny now. Her designer heels had scuff marks. Her hair wasn't salon smooth. She looked ordinary, human, even bored. They both turned at the same time and saw me. Andrew's jaw tightened. Brielle raised a hand in a lazy half-wave, then turned back to her phone. I kept walking. I had a keynote to deliver. My speech was titled, Turning Broken Glass into Windows. And the moment I stepped on stage, I saw their faces in the crowd. Andrew sat near the back. Brielle was beside him, scrolling like none of it mattered. But I knew it did. Because as I spoke, about resilience, about transformation, about betrayal being a launch pad rather than a grave, heads nodded. Eyes welled. And every word I spoke was like reclaiming another piece of the dignity they tried to steal from me. I ended with this. We don't rise because someone let us. We rise because we finally realize they were never holding us back. We were just holding on too long. Applause. Thunderous. The host came up, thanked me, and people began lining up to shake my hand. I saw Andrew stand, hesitate, then walk out. Brielle followed, saying something to him with an annoyed flick of her wrist. They didn't stay for the after-event dinner. But I did. And that night, a man from a corporate events firm approached me. "We'd love to partner with you for a national campaign," he said. "Your story. It's everything we want to highlight." He handed me a contract. The following week I expanded. Opened a second location. Then a third. And one morning as I sat in a cafe reviewing floral proposals, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. "Clara. It's Andrew. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I've hit a rough patch. I'm looking for opportunities in the events space again. If you hear of anything, even assistant level, I'd be grateful." I stared at the message for a full minute, then deleted it. No anger. No joy. Just clarity. He was never the architect of my downfall. He was the wrecking ball that cleared space for me to build. And I had built everything. That night I hosted a gala at Rose Hall. The same hall I once cried in, imagining myself walking down an aisle that never was. Now I walked through crowds of clients, collaborators, and women who whispered, "You inspire me." I paused under the chandelier, my favorite spot. A young woman approached, nervous. "Hi. I know you probably hear this a lot, but I was left too. A year ago. At the altar. I thought my life was over. But then I read about you. You helped me believe again." I took her hand. "Your story's not over," I said. "It's just getting good." She cried. So did I. Not for pain, but for everything that came after. They say healing isn't linear. They say time dulls pain, but I've learned something else. True healing happens the day you stop chasing closure and realize you are the closure. A year to the day after I was left standing at the altar, I hosted a wedding in Rose Hall. Not just any wedding. It was my wedding. Not to Andrew, of course not. That story had long since closed its pages. This time I was marrying Daniel. He had walked into my life quietly, like a breeze through an open window, unexpected but welcome. A landscape architect with a deep laugh and calloused hands who always made sure the flowers in my garden bloomed just right. He wasn't flashy. He didn't make grand speeches. But he showed up. Every day. And when he asked me to marry him, it wasn't with fireworks or a skywriter. It was with a quiet, "I'd like to grow old with you if you'll let me." And I did. But I didn't rush it. I made him wait longer than I'd ever let anyone wait before. Not because I didn't love him, but because I needed to be sure I wasn't saying yes out of fear of being alone. I said yes because this time I wanted to choose love, not just be chosen. The ceremony was held in the east wing of the venue, the same space where I had once imagined walking down the aisle in a dress I never got to wear. Now I stood at the top of the same staircase, only this time no tears. No pit in my stomach. Just peace. The guests stood as the music swelled. And I walked. Not toward a man to save me, but beside one who respected the woman I had become on my own. After the vows, we danced under soft lights, surrounded by people who had watched me rise from ashes to architect. Friends, clients, strangers turned family. All cheering, all crying. And somewhere I knew someone was scrolling past photos on social media, seeing me glowing in my lace gown and wondering how I had turned a nightmare into this masterpiece. Andrew wasn't invited. Of course not. But life has a way of bringing things full circle even when you think you've outrun them. 2 weeks after the wedding, I was invited to consult on a restoration project, a historic inn that was being converted into a high-end retreat. I met with the investors at the property for a walkthrough. And that's when I saw him. Andrew. He was the lead project manager. His company had been hired before mine, but when they couldn't deliver a clear design strategy, the board brought me in. He looked older. Not in age but in weight. That kind of heavy you carry in your posture when life didn't pan out like you thought it would. Our eyes met. He opened his mouth like he wanted to speak, but I turned back to the investor beside me and said, "Let's start with the front terrace. I'd like to preserve the original arches." And that was that. There was no confrontation. No dramatic final showdown. Just the soft, satisfying silence of knowing I no longer needed anything from him. Not an apology. Not an explanation. Not a regret. He wasn't my villain anymore. He was just someone I used to know. After that day I never saw him again. But I kept rising. The mentorship program I launched turned into a nonprofit. Women from small towns and broken hearts came together not to complain, but to build. I taught them how to turn pain into purpose. How to take every not good enough and turn it into watch me. I published a memoir. I was invited to do a TED Talk. And one afternoon as I stood looking out over a garden I had designed myself, roses blooming where weeds once thrived, I finally understood what power really felt like. It wasn't in taking revenge. It wasn't in proving anyone wrong. It was in living so fully, so freely that their opinions could no longer hold weight. And that's the altar I built for myself. Not one of marble or flowers or ceremony, but one of resilience, of worth, of peace. So, if someone ever tells you you're not enough, if someone walks away or leaves you standing in the ruins of what you thought was your future, don't crumble. Build. And when you do, build something so beautiful, so brilliant, so boldly yours, that one day they'll whisper your name and even they will have to admit, they were never the main character in your story. You were. All along. If you've ever been underestimated, left behind, or broken in silence, this story is for you. Like, comment, share, and subscribe if you believe that rising isn't just possible, it's your destiny.